Welcome everyone to Global Film Exhibition. This is Robert Wayne with Behind the Frames, and today we've got a special guest, Mr. Edward Payson of an Anti-Hero production. Ed, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. So, tell us a bit about yourself and your journey into filmmaking.
Sure. Well, how far back do you want me to go? Just when I first got into film, when I was really young, or kind of my professional journey?
Just go with your professional journey.
Sure. So I came to California in 2007 to a little film school called Columbia College Hollywood. That's about 350 students. At that point, I had never been to the film school and I had never been to California. I had just been clicking around on a website, and one of the ads for the website that I was looking at in New Hampshire, where I'm from, was this place called Columbia College. And the thing that it boasted that really made me, excited to check it out was the fact that it said that every other film school that you would go to, you wouldn't be able to touch a camera for 2 years. Basically, you'd be doing all your classes you didn't want to do, the general education requirements. And this kind of one was like, on day one, you'll start using a camera. So I went through the process, and lo and behold, day one, I got to start using a camera, but still not to the degree that I really wanted to, because really they were teaching you how to use the camera and stuff, but you weren't actually shooting things in class, and you still wouldn't be doing that until probably junior or senior year. So trial by fire right then and there, without really knowing anything, I decided to start making my first horror feature film freshman year when I was in Columbia College. It was called Morbid: A Love Story, and it was just my friends at the school. A lot of friends that were a lot richer than me, I should say, that had their own cameras and stuff, and we were shooting movies on the weekend. And that was like a 2-year process of just shooting on weekends and just doing things as we could afford it out of pocket. And then from there, it was off to the races. And I've done a bunch of documentaries and feature films, short films, commercials since then.
Awesome, awesome. So, and then when did you start an Anti-Hero production?
So that was actually the first movie. I've had it since that first movie, and it's been an anti-hero production ever since. So mid 2007, I would say.
So, has horror always been your favorite?
Horror was always the thing I gravitated towards that made me want to be a filmmaker as a child. I had both my father, who was really, really into horror, and then I had this babysitter who would come over who I remember her name. Her name was Patricia Bodwell, and she was this old lady, probably in like her 60s, and her two favorite things were Beavis and Butthead and horror movies. And it just so happens that her daughter owned a video store, and she'd bring over boxes and boxes of these previously viewed tapes or the screener tapes that they no longer wanted at the video store. And that was kind of my education on horror, per se, is because everybody knows Jason, everybody knows Friday the 13th, everybody knows Michael Myers, but seeing movies like Rumpelstiltskin and all these straight to video horror films from the 90s, that really made me just fall in love with the genre and decide, I think at a really young age, probably around like 10 or 11 years old, I picked up my family's video camera and started trying to do things just with that. And then obviously when I got older, I got more professional about it.
Right on. Now, from what I understand, your father was big into horror films as well, correct?
Yeah. He was a gunsmith from Texas, and my parents got divorced really, really young. So I basically went to his house on the weekends or every other weekend with my brother. And because he worked so much as a gunsmith and having his own business, he had a club called PDM Sports that sold, different ammunition and hunting apparel and things you need for hunting. Sometimes he'd have to work. Just so happens on the days, because he couldn't change the days because of whatever the court order was or whatever. So some days he'd have to work and kind of figure out how to appease, a 6 and 5-year-old child. And one of the ways he did that was while he was making bullets in the basement one day, he put on a little 5x5 black and white TV. He put Night of the Living Dead. And it was the first horror film my brother and I had ever seen. And from then we kind of both were hooked. So
Well, I tell you, my own journey with horror, I saw Carrie when I was about 10, and I was hooked. Even though it scared the shit out of me, I was hooked on horror. So, an anti-hero production. Tell us what anti-hero production is all about.
So basically, my whole life I was into the anti-heroes in films,
Hmm.
um, and you have the Hercules, the flawed hero, the Venoms, the Spawns, those kinds of people
Hmm.
in fiction. So I was like, oh, anti-hero production has to be that. And now that name has people haven't understood it in some places. I went to Utah one time, and someone actually came up to me, a really really huge guy, and was just like, hey, what do you mean an anti-hero production? My brother was in the military and he is a hero. And like got all mad at me. I was like, no, like Greek mythology, anti-hero. I had to explain the whole thing to him. But yeah, that's where it came from.
So, in your filmmaking, what would you say the subjects that interest you the most?
I really like the underdog stories, especially with documentaries. I very much focused on underdog stories. My first documentary was called Unsigned, and it was about three rock bands trying to make it in Los Angeles,
Hmm.
all with their own different stories. One person being homeless, trying to run a rock and roll band, out of his car with his cell phone and sleeping in their rehearsal studio. I made another movie called Our Friend John, which you saw. It's about three young boys making the film of their friend who passed away of sickle cell anemia. He was writing a horror film before he died, and they made it kind of in his honor, even though they weren't really into filmmaking. So it was, again, trial by fire, learning on the go, and having to do everything on top of dealing with their own personal disabilities they had themselves. So um, that seems to be the theme. It seems to be the trend of what I'm going for is to kind of highlight the little guy.
Well, I tell you, I can't. I watched Our Friend John, and I was just blown away. I could not. It was so inspiring to me to see these young filmmakers with their own personal challenges, making this dream come true for this family friend. Um, it's everything that global film exhibition's all about, because our little company is all about inclusiveness and diversity in all aspects of filmmaking. And folks, for those of you watching, if you haven't seen Our Friend John, you owe it to yourself to watch this film. It's worth every minute of your time. It's a very inspiring story. It's something, sadly, that doesn't get as much exposure as it should. It's available on Tubi and YouTube and any other platforms.
I think those are the two main ones right now. They kind of jumps around with the smaller platforms.
Hmm.
The smaller platforms will have it for like a month, and then they'll, take it down, and it'll go on another smaller platform. But if you just go in, if you have like a Fire Stick or a Roku or something, and either put my name, Edward Payson,
Hmm.
or put Our Friend John, it'll come up, and then all the places you can watch it at.
Well, one of the things that I hit upon was you had an established actress that actually came in and helped with this, Maria Olson.
Mm-hmm.
We would definitely want to give her a shout out. Um, how was it working with Maria? She seems like someone who's got a wealth of knowledge to share.
So I actually met Maria way back when I did Morbid, a love story. She was a smaller role, but we got along so well that she ended up being in my next film, feature film called the Cohasset Snuff Film. She ended up helping with this. And then she actually was producer in a bunch of films and even in films that haven't even been released yet. Like I have a film called Bits that she's also in. So
Hmm.
I've worked with her on a ton of things because of that personality and because she's so cool to work with.
So, in making Our Friend John, did that experience affect your approach to filmmaking in any way? In your future filmmaking?
Um, I don't know if it affected my. It was definitely a hard film to shoot because it was the most personal,
Hmm.
and I was, dealing with, firsthand. These people are in my life every day, especially if people watch it and see like the twist in the middle of it. Um, having to be a filmmaker, but also having to be a brother or a family member to some of these people. It was definitely hard, especially some of the things that they would say, and then you have to like not react right then and there. You have to kind of keep filming, and so I don't know if it would it affected me, but I don't know if it would change my approach, on future movies.
Well, it was definitely a heartfelt film. It got me right here. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Um, Gosh, check it out, folks. It's worth your time. Um, so moving on, and you've done a number of straightforward films and documentaries, and one that I want to talk about right now got a lot of buzz over the last couple of years. And that's In Search of All American Massacre, the Lost Texas Chainsaw film.
Hmm.
And matter of fact, that's how we became acquainted. I did the couple of voiceover pieces for it, and was very honored to be a part of that project. I did not know anything about this story. Um, I was, of course, aware of Texas Chainsaw Massacre and all the sequels and everything, but I had never heard this story. So it was very interesting to me. What interested you the most about this project? Was it a personal project, or was it a collaborative thing?
Well, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head was the fact that like I thought myself as a large Texas Chainsaw Massacre fan, but then talking to other Texas Chainsaw Massacre fans, not many people knew about it. And these are people that had like Texas Chainsaw tattoos, people that like, had whole shrines dedicated to Texas Chainsaw Massacre,
Hmm.
and they had never heard of this film. And then when go and research it, the story just gets crazier and crazier with, the people involved or not involved, and um, the whereabouts of the film, and it just was this kind of this wormhole that sucked me in. And I was like, I need to make something about this, because there was a few short videos here and there about it, but there really wasn't like an all-encompassing documentary with all the possible information that was out there.
Well, I really enjoyed the fact that you got a lot of people involved in this. I mean, my goodness, Greg Herger was part of that film, and he gave of his time to tell what he knew about it. A lot of people want to see this thing released. The one really interesting thing was the Bill Moseley situation. I know initially he had agreed to cooperate with you guys and talk about what he knew, and then all of a sudden, you guys are already in production of this thing, and then you get word from his attorney or through some of his people that he was no longer at liberty to discuss this project. Now that's kind of mysterious, huh? Why do you think Bill opted out all of a sudden?
Well, we got word. So basically, we had never talked directly to Bill until later on. We had talked to his management company. It was a lady named Judy Fox, and essentially, she was just coming at it, to start from a money perspective. We were working out the money, and then they agreed to terms based on what we were going to pay him for the interview. But then less than like 2 hours later, she sent another email and said he's actually not available to do this, with
Wow.
no real explanation. But then our producer Pat Kuznati ended up working on a film personally with Bill later, and he had just told the filmmakers that he was no longer at liberty to speak about All American Massacre, because I guess whenever he did, the filmmakers would just get hit up by so many different people to talk about it and stuff, and it was just overwhelming. So that's why he wasn't really at liberty to speak about it anymore.
And it adds more mythos to the story. Um, this is fascinating because I mean, because of the people involved. I mean, this was Toby Hooper's son,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it just, I don't know. It's a fascinating documentary. And you had a great panel of people, including one of my favorites, Felissa Rose Esposito. Um, she was just fantastic in there. You can tell she's a real horror fan. I want to back up just a moment. we were talking about Bill Moseley. I just wanted to let people know that if you don't recognize that name, I'm sure you've seen one of his films. He was in Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2. Is that correct? It was Part 2,
Yeah.
wasn't it? Yeah.
Mhm.
And then he's also appeared in some of Rob Zombie's films like House of a Thousand Corpses and Devil's Rejects. And he's made, got considerably over 100 films in his career, I'm sure. Um, and then Felissa Rose Esposito, she was most well known as playing Angela in Sleepaway Camp, one of my personal favorites from the 80s. What was it like to work with Felissa?
Another like Maria Olson. She's a huge, friend of mine as well. I've worked with her in a bunch of different things. Um, I was first introduced through a mutual friend, just as like a fan. Basically, I was like, I'm a huge fan. Introduced me to her,
Mm-hmm.
and I think I met her at her own birthday party at like a Mexican restaurant that this friend took me to. And then from there, like she worked on a short film of mine, and then she worked on a yet to be released horror film of mine, and now the documentary. So a lot of
Mm-hmm.
different things, and then also like through me, she got onto my friend's film, my friend Brandon's film, and a few other friends' films. So yeah, we have a pretty good working relation. We literally went to the horror con nearby when we moved to Georgia. We moved from Los Angeles to Georgia very recently. Went to the horror con just to talk to her essentially the whole time.
She seems like she's a lot of fun, very outgoing, is the way she comes across. Very counter to the character she played in Sleepaway Camp, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, what what kind of what do you think is going to become of this whole all American massacre? What's your personal thoughts on how it just might end up?
Well, I was told by someone who worked on the film, or who was actually someone who was going to be formally interviewed,
Hmm.
and they sent their footage, but the footage didn't come out, come out right. He said that he might know who has it. He didn't really want to get into who he thinks or might have it, but I guess there's a collector in the Tampa area that has like a huge Texas Chainsaw Massacre collection to the point of like, oh, like screen use props and all this. He thinks he might have the footage that was bought from eBay.
Hmm.
Um, but I never followed up with that because he didn't give me the info and didn't want to give me the info for whatever reason. Um, but that footage, I think, will be found. I don't know if the new Texas Chainsaw is ever going to come out. Because I did, and I can say this like 2 years later, I did have meetings with people who actually worked on the production team in the film. We had a coffee meeting and everything like that, and things seemed really, really good. Like I was going to get a copy of this movie to release at some point with the documentary, kind of in tandem. And it seemed like Tony was on board and everything to have that happen, but then like contact just got completely lost. Like I kept like following up, but nothing was happening, or no word or no decision was made, and I was just like, I can't keep waiting for the movie to not
Hmm.
come out. Um, so that's kind of where that is. Hopefully, at one point, it gets finished, or even if it doesn't get finished, he just has a change of heart and wants to release it.
Yeah, it would be nice to see that. Yeah, it's very interesting. And so, for In Search of All American Massacre, the Lost Texas Chainsaw film, folks, if you're horror fans and if you like the backstories and just stories in general of the franchises, check out In Search of All American Massacre. It's a great, great show. A lot of information in there. It's very intriguing. And you can also check that out on Tubi and Amazon Prime. Um, check it out. Check it out. Put that down. So, as a filmmaker, Ed, do you prefer Ed or Edward? I didn't ask you.
Edward's fine.
Okay, okay. So, in Global Film Exhibition, we have followers from all over the globe, and they are of all different levels well, they're anywhere from hobbyists to novices, all the way up to more advanced filmmakers, and they're always curious about what other directors have to say about things. So, what we would like to do is ask you a few questions about filmmaking, and have you share some of your tidbits of wisdom. What in terms of workflow, what are your thought processes whenever you approach a project? Do you have anything in particular that you're thinking about in laying out things in your mind of how you want it to look?
I guess that my approach is a lot different depending on if I'm doing a narrative film or if I'm doing a documentary. The way documentaries are always kind of in my mind are, if you look at it as if you're a statue builder,
Mm-hmm.
with a documentary, it's a lot different. Like with a narrative film, if you're a statue builder, you start with the feet, you go with make the knees, and then you work your way up until the statue is made from bottom to top. And that's the way a narrative film would be. You kind of like have to do it that way because you have the full script, you have the structure of it. Whereas with a documentary, you really don't know going into it what it's going to become. So really, it's like instead of having this set plan to start making everything from bottom to top, you just get this giant mold of clay and you chip away at it till something's made that's coherent and starts to form into something. So I know with a documentary that there's going to be a lot more time editing. There's going to be a lot more time shooting. A lot of times you're dealing with people's personal schedules, whether that's a remote interview or an in-person interview. With a narrative film, like this is the schedule. We're going to shoot everything in this date. We're going to have everything in the edit done by this date, and this is what we're going to do. So it's a lot more structured. Whereas, at least for me, I like documentaries because they're a lot more like loosey goosey, as you could say. Like it's more kind of go with the flow. Whenever you have time, you work on it, and then whenever you get done, you're done. And also with documentaries, the cool thing is you're not on this deadline. So basically, you have the time to perfect things, especially with indie documentaries. I wouldn't say you could do that with like a Netflix documentary or something. You probably have deadlines for that. But for the ones I'm working on, where I'm like the producer, the director, and the editor, and shooting a lot of the stuff, I'm able to just release at my own pace and when I think the project's ready to get out there. Whereas like in the past, when I've worked on things, because we have a release date and that kind of thing, maybe the scene isn't as perfect as I want it to be, but you kind of have to they say, throw your baby away with the bathwater in a way. As long as somebody else thinks it's passable, sometimes that's all you can do.
Right, right. What are some important things that directors need to that they need to remember when they deal with cast and crew?
Well, the one thing is like you're all there to do something that 99% of the world wishes they could do. So
Mhm.
there's no need to be a dick, or there's no need to, just throw your weight around and be a jerk to anybody. Like you're all there to do the same thing, um, and just be nice. There's no reason to ever be mean to anyone on set when you all have a similar goal. And then also the big thing that people need to do: if you feed your crew well, they'll go to the end of the earth with you.
I was just going to bring that up next. I heard Danielle Harris one time. For those of you who may not recognize that name, I don't see how you couldn't if you're a horror fan. But she played Jamie Lloyd, Laurie Strode's daughter in Halloween 4 and Halloween 5. And she's gone on to do a multitude of other projects. Great actress. But I heard her mention one time that feed your crew is what she said. She said, take a few $100s, go get pizza, something. She said, a well fed crew is a happy crew. So I figured I would segue into that since you brought it up. Um, what kind of atmosphere do you seek to present or to instill on your film projects? Is it some less stressful than others, like the difference between, as you said, a narrative film and a documentary? Or is it pretty much, the director sets the pace, right? Or the attitude?
So I have the luxury of having worked on films with feature films with budgets as low as $200 to as high as $1 million. So and a bunch of ones in between. And I honestly prefer the smaller budget ones, really, because the smaller budget ones you usually have a lot less people to worry about.
Mhm.
Like for this $1 million film, this Bits horror movie that I'm doing about a haunted Sega Genesis game. You have Dee Wallace and a bunch of horror people in it, Bill Oberst Jr. and tons of people. But we had like a 30-person crew. We had all these locations. We had, the whole honey wagon with all the dressing rooms and the works, all the cast and crew, 10, 15 different locations. And with that, I feel like being less hands-on was kind of working on all these projects beforehand, where I was kind of like the guy who would have to make all the decisions and stuff. It felt really weird to me to get on the set the first day and be like, oh, here, Mr. Payson, here's your dressing room. We'll tell you when the set is ready. Something didn't feel right about that, especially because most sets that I'm on, I don't even get a chair. And I don't sit the entire day, and then don't realize that I didn't sit the entire day until I get home at the end of the night and can't walk. So I kind of like the hands-on. I like the small crew that you trust, and you can do a smaller amount. You can't do these huge projects with a small crew, but sometimes the experience is a lot less stressful and a lot more rewarding for whatever reason.
So moving on, as a director, you hear a lot of talk about digital. And I actually saw a statistic on this that said as of 2017, 92% of film is digital now. And so I was curious your thoughts on digital or actual film. Or do you prefer one over the other for certain projects? Because I know some directors like the certain aesthetic qualities of film.
Funny enough, I've never made a movie on film. Even there was classes to do it in our school, and I never did. I have priced out movies to be made on film, but then after seeing like how astronomical it was going to be just for the film, like we did like the bare minimum. Like this is what we would get in rolls for a 35 millimeter for a hour and 30-minute film. And it was like close to $100,000 just for the film and processing. So, yeah, I love digital, especially being someone that's all about like equality in filmmaking and not there being any gatekeeping and things like that. Like digital has opened up the world to so many people who might not have ever made a film. I just had a post the other day that I did on Facebook about how we live in a time where, if you have an idea, you can get it out there. Whereas there were so many people in the past who maybe wanted to be filmmakers in the 80s and 70s, 60s, whatever. Just anybody in the past might have gone their entire lives and never made anything wanting to be filmmakers because they just couldn't get to that budget range where they could actually afford it, or didn't know the people that had the money that could afford it.
Right.
So we're very lucky in that degree. And I'm one of the few people who even thinks that AI is a great thing. I know a lot of people like in the industry hate AI and think that it's going to be like the end of days and things like that. But I think if it's used as a tool, we shouldn't, frown upon tools that better help us to move along. AI has been astronomical in helping me create, like I've been able to do a documentary a month for the past like 4 months.
Wow.
Just utilizing not just AI, but utilizing all the different versions of AI, and it's almost like having a friend near you at all points where you can bounce ideas off of, especially with like Chat GPT and stuff. You can keep bouncing ideas off of someone 24/7 anytime you want, and it automatically saves right when you open your computer and go back into the app. It's there, and you can continue where you left off. It's been like amazing with like outlining with my documentaries when I'm actually going to do the interview. Figuring out questions based on people's like bios and stuff like that.
Right.
It can suggest questions that you can literally type something like, if I'm interviewing this person, this is their bio. What do you think the average person that's not into this, genre, whatever this is, would be interested to hear from someone like this? And it will give you suggestions. And, it might not be the best suggestions. It might give you like 30 different questions, and maybe you pick like two, but still that's two questions that like are really good that you can then throw into your list of questions for that person. So it just makes everything move so much faster and smoother.
Yeah, it's incredible. This AI, just how it's come on full force, just over this past year, really. You're seeing it everywhere, and I know people in my industry, voiceover, some have been freaking out about it, and I tell them, I say, guys, look, AI is going to find its way into the industry, and it's going to find a comfortable spot, and there's room for it, really. Um, there's a ton of work out there in voiceover in all different kinds of categories, and AI is not going to do all of it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the voices have come along compared to what they used to be. They sound more human-like, but for certain projects, clients still prefer the nuances that the human voice can provide. And
Yeah.
that was one of my upcoming questions for you. You got to it um, before I was able to get to it, and I appreciate you touching on that because AI is a very important subject that's going on right now, especially in the filmmaking and audio industries. Um, what are what are some of the mistakes that you see first-time filmmakers make? Things that our filmmaking community can consider.
Sure. I think a lot of people try to make their first films um, beyond their means. They'll try to make, instead of like, with horror, you can never go wrong with horror
Mhm.
because that's easy. You have, you can make it with unknowns as far as actors go. But you see people trying to make these like action films or trying to make these dramas and stuff like that. And without a name attached to that, you're really not going to go far in the way of distribution and stuff unless you're an outlier. Um, so that's one of them. And then also just people making them about subjects they don't know and not doing the research for those subjects. And that even happens with big movies. Like I was just watching um, the newest Strangers movies, Strangers Chapter 1. And there's so many times where like you watch that movie and you're like, oh, this person doesn't know how a gun works. Like, or this person doesn't know how like the forest works or something like that. But what I mean by that is there's times where people are just walking through the forest with no light source, but for some reason they're able to see in the just like the complete dark forest. They're able to just see perfectly well in the dark.
Mhm.
And then there's a part of the movie where someone cocks a gun and then doesn't shoot it, and then a scene later cocks the gun again, and because it took them the time to cock the gun, the killer gets away. It's like you just cocked the gun in the last scene. You don't need to cock it twice. Um, just things like that. Just like the more personal the project is to you and to things you know about or to things you're passionate about, the better it's going to come out.
Right, right. And talking about those little mistakes, there's no substitute for a good continuity person on a set. It makes for some humorous moments. I remember when I was a kid watching these old cowboy movies, westerns, and they they were filmed in a studio, and they had the film running behind them, and you'd see the same trees and the same mountains or hills or whatever pass, a half a dozen times while they're riding, from town to town, little things like that. But we're not supposed to notice that. Our generation picked up on that kind of stuff, though. We could point it out left and right. So, Ed, I have a question about crowdfunding. This is a very popular method for filmmakers of all levels to raise money for films. And I know our filmmaking audience would love to hear your thoughts on crowdfunding, maybe some of the do's and don'ts, things to watch out for. What are your thoughts on crowdfunding?
I think it's a love-hate relationship for me. I did a lot of crowdfunding right when it came out, right when it was the new popular thing to do. Sites like Indiegogo and Kickstarter were the only sites out there. Now there's like a plethora of like smaller ones, GoFundMe, all that kind of stuff. And I think it was a viable way more so back in like 2009, 2010, up to like 2012 and 13. But now since every person has a crowdfunding campaign or everybody has a GoFundMe for something, I think the audiences are really, kind of sick and tired of it, or backers per se, especially if you do it the wrong way. I know a lot of people get themselves in heat because they don't talk to someone the entire year, but then the only time they ever talk to somebody on their friends list or something is that yearly or monthly GoFundMe message. And then that's all they communicate is trying to get money from you. And also the traffic for these sites, just the organic traffic for these sites has gone down over the years. Whereas like you used to have a cool idea, maybe you put it on Kickstarter and a bunch of strangers fund it. Now you really have to have your own network to at least jumpstart it, depending on how much money you're trying to raise. I know they say that if you have a huge project, you should have at least 10% to 20% of that project spoken for in the first day, of people that have already said they would pledge to your project. And then you get put on like the front page, which is like the trending page. And then from there, you can maybe do a little bit better. And I will say too, there used to be no option on Kickstarter or Indiegogo to have like a campaign where if you don't raise your goal, you get some of the money. It was all or nothing before. So I think right now, if it's a smaller film, maybe go with Indiegogo. But of course, like do your due diligence and trying to get people to pre-commit before the funding starts, just so you have like a base of like, okay, how much do I need to get? How much do I need to do to make this happen? And I know a lot of places too for the big money type of things. I'm talking like $100,000 plus. They'll hire like agencies and stuff that'll take a percentage of that, and a lot of them will make it happen. It's just like you have to have a lot of stuff in place, like many videos, not just like the main video, but like, oh, here's a video for if we hit this goal. Here's a video if we want to hit this goal. Here's a progress video. So they just want like constant stream of content for people to watch and stay engaged with the project.
I've noticed that to encourage people to donate to the cause, that some filmmakers, directors, what have you, will offer enticements like different levels of donating, such as get an executive producer credit or an associate producer credit for if you donate this amount or that amount. Do you find that makes any difference, or have you not done that kind of thing?
I think that makes a difference if most of your network are filmmakers. I know that a lot of like people who aren't filmmakers are really into the tangible, like in hand things, especially if you're making a movie. They want to have the poster, they want to have the nice DVD or Blu-ray, they want to have anything else, maybe a signed cast poster, an invite. Maybe one of the perks is an invite to the premiere, or early access to the movie. People like to feel like that VIP status, but it really just depends. Like I've seen people do well with just like 3 tiers, and not really offering much of anything, just kind of like, oh, well, special thanks in the credits is like the main thing you can get.
Right,
And maybe
right.
like a signed postcard or something. And still they do well just because I think it's all about network.
Yeah, I find the whole networking thing very interesting, especially in filmmaking. It's incredible the resources and so forth that's out there for filmmakers to take advantage of. Okay, so what I'd like to do right now, Ed, is take the opportunity to have you discuss some future projects, any projects that you might have in the works. What would you like to plug? Let us know.
Sure. Yeah. So for the last 2 years, I've been working on the sequel to my retro video game collecting documentary called Rarity: Retro Video Game Collecting in the Modern Era. We're working on part two. Part one was 19 different collectors from all across the United States, and some out of the United States, people with multi-million dollar collections or multi-million dollar items. This one is a huge undertaking because it's actually, instead of 19 interviews, it is over 60 interviews. So that's why it's taking like 2 years.
Hmm.
So we have that to look forward to. And then I have my monthly cryptid documentary that I'm trying to release every single month, a new cryptid documentary. Right now, I'm focusing on all the cryptids throughout the New England area. So we have one for Maine, one for New Hampshire, and one for Massachusetts coming very, very soon. And then
Hmm.
we kind of do go off on little tangents where there's full documentaries about some of the creatures themselves, just one creature in that area. So we have one called Legend of the Thunderbird that's available now that you can watch. That's just about Thunderbirds and their lore and their meaning to Native American tribes and that kind of
Hmm.
stuff. And then I have those two features I talked about earlier that hopefully are coming out of post production and will be released the end of the year or early 2025. So lots to look forward to.
Well, that sounds awesome. Sounds like you've got a lot on your plate. Where will the viewers be able to check out your cryptid series?
So right now there are two available on YouTube. I'm waiting for some larger places to pick them up before I'm actively promoting them, but there's one called Stash Unexplained YouTube channel,
Hmm.
and two are available right there to watch right now. That's the Legend of the Thunderbird and Hidden in the Granite Cryptids of New Hampshire. Both of those are available in entirety for free to watch right now on that Stash Unexplained YouTube channel. And the main one, called Beyond the Pines, will be available at the end of the month.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. And your feature films, any ideas um, of where people will be able to check those out once they're released?
Yeah, so the feature films are going to have a festival run first, so it probably won't be available to the public until about 2025, if not a little later.
Mhm.
But we travel all around the country and the world to these film festivals, so we'll have a schedule on our Facebook page and Anti-Hero Production of where and when certain things will be scheduled to screen. And if they're near your town, feel free to come by and say hello.
All right. Well, that is awesome. We look forward to it. Edward Payson, I sincerely appreciate your time. You've imparted a wealth of knowledge that I believe our viewers and our filmmakers will be able to get some benefit from. And we certainly hope that you'll come and visit us again sometime. Your projects are always interesting. I haven't seen anything boring. They're always interesting, very interesting. So thank you so much for your time. You've been very generous, and I'll go ahead and sign off. This is Robert Wayne with Behind the Frames. See you next time.